Before GOAT was a daily debate, before sneakers were traded like stocks, before the game felt global, there was a kid from Wilmington, North Carolina, who carried a cut list in his memory and a scoreboard in his chest. His name is Michael Jordan. You've seen the highlights, gravity-defying dunks, last-second daggers, a tongue out mid-flight like a dare to the laws of physics. But the clips don't tell the whole story. They don't show you the quiet hours in empty gyms, the miles run when no one was watching, the losses that carved him into the player he became. They don't show you a son working with his father's hands, a student shaped by a coach who taught him to trust five more than one, or a man who turned a pair of shoes into a cultural passport. This isn't just a career retrospective. It's a map of the mentality, how a teenager cut from varsity built a dynasty, how a brand became a banner, how a player became an era. We'll walk through the Pistons' bruises, the first trophy tears, the sudden goodbye, the two words that shook sports, "I'm back," and the last shot that felt like a signature on marble. If you never watched him live, this is the closest thing to being there. If you did, you'll remember the feeling, the hush before a possession, the certainty, somehow, that the moment belonged to him. And if you're lacing up right now, wondering how far work and will can take you, his story is the answer millions still carry on to courts around the world. This is Michael Jeffrey Jordan. 6 rings, 5 MVPs, 2 Olympic golds, and one relentless standard that changed the sport, the business, and the culture. Not a myth, a method, not just a legend, a legacy. Stay with us, because to understand Air Jordan, you have to start on the ground. Michael Jeffrey Jordan was born on February 17, 1963, Brooklyn by birth certificate, Carolina by identity. When the family settled in Wilmington, North Carolina, the Jordans brought with them what greatness always needs first: structure. James Jordan, a steady presence with a gentle sternness, taught his son the value of working with your hands. Fix it, build it, respect the craft. Dolores Jordan, disciplined and uncompromising with schoolwork, planted in him something rarer than talent: accountability. In that house, excuses had no home. Outside, the Real classroom was the backyard and the blacktop. Michael learned the rhythm of competition in one-on-one battles with his older brother Larry. Stronger, scrappier, older by a little, but wiser by a lot. Those games did not come with whistles or warm hugs. They came with elbows, pride, and lessons you could feel in your ribs. If you wanted the next possession, you didn't ask for it. You took it. If you wanted respect, you earned it. Somewhere between the asphalt and the arguments, the switch flipped. Losing wasn't just painful, it was unacceptable. And it wasn't about being better than everyone else. It started with being better than yesterday. At Emslie, Laney High School, the gym smelled like varnish and possibility. Jordan, as a skinny sophomore, stood in front of a wall of names, those who would suit up for varsity. His wasn't on it. The story has been retold so often it can sound like folklore. But for him, it was fluorescent-lit reality. He didn't make the cut. Some say that moment made him. The truth is simpler and harder. He decided to make himself. He didn't quit. He joined junior varsity. And while varsity played under brighter lights, Michael made the JV gym burn. He turned weekday nights into small auditions for the future, dropping points in bunches, attacking the rim like a promise. He grew taller, but more importantly, he grew sharper. He learned how to carve space with a jab step, how to change speed within a single dribble, how to finish through contact without looking for rescue from a whistle. He wasn't waiting to be noticed. He was forcing the issue. The routine became a ritual. Show up before sunrise. Stay until keys turned in locks. Shots, sprints, footwork, repeat. There is a particular loneliness to chasing greatness in an empty gym. The thud of the ball, the squeak of soles, the rim's metal cough when a shot is off. For most, that loneliness is a tax. For Michael, it was peace. It was where he learned to take every miss personally and every make as the new minimum. Coaches saw the hunger before they had words for it. He wasn't just athletic, he was attentive. Tell him once. Watch him do it twice. Watch him master it by the 3rd repetition. He asked questions that revealed an early obsession with the small edges. Which angle turns a contested layup into an uncontested one? Where should my eyes sit in a defender's stance to read his balance? What does my teammate need to see from me to trust me with the last shot? Soon enough, varsity couldn't ignore JV's headline. Jordan made the team, and then he made the team different. Teammates discovered they were guarding a standard, not a person. If practice began at 3, Michael's sweat was already dried by then. He didn't just set pace, he set temperature. You could either warm up or get left behind. Senior year arrived with the weight of expectation and the buoyancy of inevitability. He filled stat sheets, he filled bleachers, he filled conversations that began with "Did you see?" and ended with "He did what?" But underneath the rising noise, the formula stayed brutally simple. Defend like the next possession decides your future. Attack like the rim insulted your family. Recover like there's no trainer coming to save you. He chased rebounds he had no business getting. He turned steals into punctuation. He learned that momentum isn't a wave you ride. It's a current you create. Home offered no shortcuts. James would still pull Michael into chores, into repairs, into the practical world of tools and tasks. It grounded him. Dolores made sure grades never became a ghost he'd have to chase later. Balance wasn't a word in motivational posters. It was a rule with consequences. The message was clear. If you want the extraordinary, master the ordinary first. Recruiting letters came. Phone calls followed. The living room became a map of possibilities. There were promises, pitches, visions of immediate stardom. Michael listened, nodded, and kept his eyes on the one thing that mattered more than spotlight: fit. He chose the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Dean Smith's program, a system that valued discipline, defense, and the beauty of 5 people moving with one mind. In the days leading up to leaving Wilmington, he took one more long look at the driveway hoop that had seen both his tears and his turning point. He knew what it had given him: a work ethic disguised as stubbornness, a competitive fire disguised as sibling rivalry, and a hunger that didn't end when the buzzer did. He packed the lessons with his sneakers. Wilmington would always be the echo beneath his roar. On the last night before he left for Chapel Hill, Michael lay in the quiet of his room, posters on the wall, dreams on the ceiling, thinking about that cut list from sophomore year. He could still feel the sting, and he decided to keep it, not as a wound, but as a whetstone. He would carry it into college gyms, into NCAA arenas, into NBA cathedrals, into summers where legends are made when crowds are gone. From Wilmington's blacktop to Laney's hardwood, the pattern had emerged. See the standard, raise it, repeat. The boy who didn't make varsity had built himself into a force varsity couldn't survive without. The rest of the world didn't know it yet, but the blueprint for Air Jordan was already drafted. Work that bordered on obsession, a refusal to surrender inches or seconds, and a conviction that the next shot could rewrite the night. The bus to Chapel Hill would take a few hours. The road to immortality would take a lifetime. Michael Jordan was ready for both. When Michael Jordan arrived at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1981, he was no longer the kid who had been cut from his varsity squad. He was a lanky freshman with a fire in his chest and a quiet determination that didn't need to announce itself. Dean Smith, the legendary coach of the Tar Heels, saw something more than raw athleticism. He saw a player who could be taught, a player who would listen, and most importantly, a player who wanted to win as part of something bigger than himself. That was the essence of Dean Smith's program. At UNC, it wasn't about who scored the most points or whose name lit up headlines. It was about fundamentals, discipline, and a brand of basketball that demanded sacrifice. To some, this system felt limiting. To Jordan, it was liberating. It gave his restless energy a channel, his wild competitive streak a structure. He would often say later in life that Dean Smith was the greatest influence on his career because he taught him how to play the game the right way. Jordan didn't start his freshman year as a superstar. He was surrounded by older players, established talents, and even future NBA professionals. But even in practice, teammates noticed something unusual. Michael never coasted. He attacked every drill, every possession, with the same intensity you'd expect in the final seconds of a championship game. Scrimmages weren't casual. They were battles. And though he was just a freshman, he earned respect one relentless drive at a time. The season unfolded, and the Tar Heels built momentum. UNC was already a powerhouse, but with Jordan in the mix, they found another gear. His defense stood out, his rebounding was fearless, and his mid-range jumper became more polished with every game. He wasn't the star yet, but he was undeniably a difference-maker. The kind of player who shifted the balance of the floor without always filling the stat sheet. Then came March 1982. The NCAA championship game. The Tar Heels versus the Georgetown Hoyas. A clash of titans on college basketball's biggest stage. On one side, UNC's steady system under Dean Smith. On the other, Georgetown's intimidating defense, anchored by the towering Patrick Ewing. The game was tight, the atmosphere electric. Every possession felt like a heartbeat. As the clock wound down, Georgetown held a 1-point lead. UNC needed a basket. The ball swung around the perimeter, and suddenly, it found its way into the hands of a freshman. Michael Jordan. The weight of the moment hung in the air. Freshmen weren't supposed to take this shot. Veterans were. Stars were. But Jordan didn't hesitate. He rose up smoothly, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the rim, and released a jumper from the left wing. The ball arced high, slicing through the silence of the arena. And then, swish. Pure. Clean. Perfect. With 17 seconds left, Michael Jordan had hit the shot that would win the national championship for North Carolina. In that instant, a legend was born. Dean Smith, always understated, praised the entire team. But the country had seen something different. A freshman who wasn't afraid of the moment. A teenager with ice in his veins. That jumper didn't just win a championship. It announced Michael Jordan to the basketball world. The moment became more than a basket. It was a symbol, a foreshadowing of what was to come. Because that's who Jordan would always be. The player who wanted the ball in his hands when everything was on the line. The player who lived for pressure, who thrived on expectation, who saw fear not as a barrier, but as fuel. After that shot, Jordan's confidence exploded. The following seasons at UNC cemented his reputation. He became ACC Player of the Year. He developed into a scoring machine, but never abandoned the lessons of team play that Dean Smith drilled into him. He learned patience, strategy, and how to trust a system. He refined his shot, tightened his defense, and started to resemble not just a great college player, but something rarer, a future professional who could dominate at the highest level. But perhaps the most important growth happened off the court. At Chapel Hill, Jordan matured. He became more disciplined, more focused, more aware of what greatness required. His classmates saw both sides, the playful, charismatic teenager who loved to joke, and the ruthless competitor who would turn even a game of pool into a duel of pride. That duality, charming and cutthroat, was becoming his trademark. By the time his junior season ended, the NBA was watching closely. Scouts whispered that he was ready, that his talent was undeniable, that his competitive drive could change the trajectory of a franchise. Michael Jordan declared for the 1984 NBA draft. He left Chapel Hill not just as a champion, but as a young man armed with the lessons of Dean Smith, the belief in teamwork, and the confidence that he could seize the moment when it mattered most. And still, he carried that memory. The jumper against Georgetown. The silence, the rise, the release, the swish. It wasn't just a shot. It was the birth of Clutch Jordan. The basketball world had seen it once. Soon, they would see it again. And again. And again. The year was 1984. The NBA was entering a new era. Magic Johnson and Larry Bird had already brought the league back into the national spotlight with their fierce rivalry. But executives and fans alike were hungry for the next face of basketball. No one could have imagined that the answer would arrive in the form of a lean, athletic guard from North Carolina. Michael Jordan had just declared for the draft after 3 years at UNC. Scouts admired his explosiveness, his defense, and his ability to rise to the moment. Yet, there were doubts. Some thought he wasn't big enough to dominate in the NBA. Others whispered that he was just an athletic guard, not a franchise cornerstone. On draft night, those doubts showed. With the first overall pick, the Houston Rockets selected Hakeem Olajuwon, a dominant center from the University of Houston. It made sense. Big men ruled the league in that era. With the second pick, the Portland Trail Blazers chose Sam Bowie, another center, passing on Jordan because they already had Clyde Drexler at shooting guard. And then, with the third pick, the Chicago Bulls called his name, Michael Jordan. That moment changed everything. The Bulls, a struggling franchise desperate for direction, had just landed the player who would redefine the meaning of greatness. From the second he stepped onto an NBA court, Jordan was electric. In his very first season, he averaged 28.2 points per game. He didn't just score, he soared. Every night, he delivered highlights that left jaws on the floor. He dunked over defenders, glided through the air with a tongue-wagging swagger, and turned fast breaks into theater. Fans who had never watched the Bulls before were suddenly glued to their screens. Chicago Stadium, once half empty, began to fill with a roar that shook the rafters. The league noticed too. Opponents admitted that guarding Jordan was like trying to catch a storm with bare hands. His first step was lightning, his elevation unmatched, his creativity in mid-air breathtaking. He wasn't simply playing the game, he was performing it. And unlike anyone before him, he brought a sense of artistry to basketball that transcended the box score. By the end of that rookie year, the NBA had its answer. Michael Jordan was named Rookie of the Year. But awards were only a small part of the story. More important was the way he changed the culture. Children in playgrounds across America began to lower their tongues as they dunked, mimicking his trademark style. Fans crowded stores to buy his first Nike signature shoe, the Air Jordan I, black and red sneakers that the NBA tried to ban for not meeting uniform rules. Nike turned that ban into marketing gold. Banned became wanted. Suddenly, Jordan wasn't just a player, he was a phenomenon. But being a phenomenon didn't mean everything came easily. The Bulls were still a rebuilding team, short on talent and struggling to win consistently. Jordan carried them, night after night, into battles they had no business being in. In just his third season, he averaged a staggering 37 points per game, scoring in every possible way. Dunks, mid-range jumpers, free throws, even developing a deadly fadeaway shot. And then came one of the defining moments of his young career, the 1986 playoffs against the Boston Celtics. Facing one of the greatest teams ever assembled, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Jordan unleashed one of the most legendary performances in NBA history. In Game 2, inside the Boston Garden, he scored 63 points. 63. Against the defending champions. Against one of the toughest defenses ever. Larry Bird, a man not known for giving compliments lightly, said afterward, "That was God disguised as Michael Jordan." Though the Bulls lost the series, Jordan had announced himself to the world. He wasn't just a rising star, he was a force of nature. Every season that followed, his numbers grew more astonishing, his highlights more surreal, his impact more undeniable. Still, questions lingered. Could he win at the highest level? Could he lead a team, not just as a scorer, but as a champion? For now, the critics labeled him a showman. A player who filled arenas and posters, but not necessarily trophy cases. Jordan didn't argue with them. He didn't need to. He simply went back to work. To him, every doubt was kindling. Every question, a spark. Every challenge, a reason to train longer, harder, smarter. By the end of the 1980s, Michael Jordan had become the most electrifying player on the planet. His rookie explosion had turned the Chicago Bulls into must-see TV. His sneakers were flying off shelves worldwide. His highlights were on every commercial break. Yet, in his mind, the job was far from finished. Because greatness, as Jordan saw it, wasn't about a single draft pick or a Rookie of the Year trophy. It wasn't even about 63 points in Boston. It was about championships. And those, for the moment, still belonged to someone else. But the league had been warned. A storm had arrived in Chicago, and it wasn't going away. By the late 1980s, Michael Jordan was no longer just a rookie sensation. He was the NBA's most unstoppable scorer, a human highlight reel who filled arenas and inspired awe wherever he went. But there was one thing he didn't have, a championship. And for 3 brutal years, there was one team that stood between him and that dream, the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons were not like any other opponent. They called themselves the Bad Boys, and for good reason. Led by Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, Dennis Rodman, and Joe Dumars, the Pistons combined skill with intimidation. They weren't just willing to play physical, they thrived on it. And when it came to Michael Jordan, they developed an infamous strategy that would become legend, the Jordan rules. The Jordan rules weren't a polite defensive scheme. They were a declaration of war. Whenever Jordan drove into the lane, 2 or 3 Pistons would crash into him. Elbows, shoves, hard fouls, it didn't matter. Their mission was simple: exhaust him, frustrate him, break him. They rotated defenders constantly, forcing him into traps, double teams, and punishing contact. If Jordan soared, they would bring him down. If he fought, they would fight harder. And for a time, it worked. In 1988, Jordan and the Bulls faced the Pistons in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Jordan dazzled, as always, scoring at will, but Detroit's relentless defense wore Chicago down. The Pistons advanced. A year later, in 1989, the rivalry intensified. This time, the Bulls pushed Detroit to 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Jordan had elevated his teammates, but in the end, the Pistons' experience and brutality prevailed. By 1990, the stage was set for another clash. Once again, the Bulls faced the Pistons in the conference finals. Once again, Jordan poured in points, showing flashes of brilliance that no defense could contain. But basketball is not a one-man show, and Chicago's supporting cast was not yet ready for the moment. The Pistons battered Jordan, frustrated the Bulls, and walked away victorious, on their way to back-to-back championships. For Jordan, the losses were devastating. He had proven himself the best individual player in the league, but the Pistons had exposed a painful truth. He couldn't do it alone. Talent wasn't enough. Scoring titles weren't enough. Endurance wasn't enough. If he wanted to beat Detroit, if he wanted to be a champion, something had to change. And so, Michael Jordan transformed. The summer of 1990 became the turning point. While some stars might have blamed their teammates, Jordan looked in the mirror. He hit the weight room like never before, adding muscle to withstand the Pistons' punishment. His once slender frame grew stronger, broader, unshakable. The Pistons could knock him down, but now he could stand back up, ready for the next hit. But physical strength wasn't the only lesson. Jordan began to understand the value of trust. He couldn't defeat Detroit by trying to do everything himself. He needed his teammates, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, John Paxson, to rise with him. He started passing more, encouraging more, challenging more. The Bulls began to play not just as a collection of players, but as a unit. And behind the scenes, another key figure entered the picture, Coach Phil Jackson. Taking over in 1989, Jackson introduced the triangle offense, a system built on ball movement, spacing, and trust. At first, Jordan resisted. Why give up the ball when he was the best option on every possession? But slowly, he embraced it. He began to see that true greatness wasn't measured by points scored, but by banners raised. All the while, the rivalry with the Pistons fueled him. Every loss carved a deeper scar. Every hard foul planted a sharper memory. Jordan didn't forget. He stored the pain, the humiliation, the headlines that said the Bulls weren't tough enough. He transformed each one into motivation. By 1991, the storm inside Jordan was ready to break. The Bulls had matured, their roster stronger, their system sharper. Jordan was no longer just the best scorer in the NBA. He was its most complete player. And when the Pistons came calling again, he was prepared. But before the redemption, there had to be the suffering. The late 80s were his crucible, the years when Michael Jordan, the young superstar, was forged into Michael Jordan, the relentless competitor. For fans, those Pistons-Bulls battles were war disguised as basketball. Every game was bruises, blood, and brilliance. But for Jordan, they were something more. They were the lesson he needed most, that greatness requires not only talent, but toughness. Not only brilliance, but resilience. Not only desire, but trust. The Pistons thought the Jordan rules would break him. They were wrong. All they did was make him stronger. And when the time came, he would repay the favor, not with words, but with victories. By the spring of 1991, the Chicago Bulls were no longer the raw, vulnerable team that had been bullied year after year by the Detroit Pistons. They were hardened, sharpened, and unified. Michael Jordan had transformed, not just in body, but in mindset. He had learned patience, trust, and leadership. And now, for the first time, he and the Bulls stood on the edge of destiny. The Eastern Conference Finals brought the rivalry full circle. Once again, Chicago faced the Detroit Pistons, the reigning champions, the bad boys, the team that had humiliated them for 3 straight years. But this time, something felt different. Game 1 in Chicago set the tone. Jordan attacked, but not recklessly. He picked his spots, trusted the triangle offense, and relied on Scottie Pippen's growing brilliance. The Bulls didn't just play, they suffocated Detroit. For every foul, they answered with composure. For every shove, they responded with execution. The Pistons kept waiting for Jordan to lose his cool, to try to take on the world alone. But that Jordan was gone. The Bulls swept the Pistons in 4 straight games. 4 years of frustration, erased in a single, dominant series. As the final buzzer sounded, the Pistons walked off the court without shaking hands, cementing their reputation as villains. But for Jordan, it wasn't about revenge, it was about evolution. He had climbed the mountain that had once seemed insurmountable. And now, standing at the summit, a new challenge awaited, the NBA Finals. Their opponent? The Los Angeles Lakers. The dynasty of the 1980s, led by Magic Johnson, one of the greatest to ever play the game. For Jordan, it was the ultimate test. Defeat the Pistons, and you've conquered your demons. Defeat the Lakers, and you've claimed your crown. Game 1 didn't go according to script. The Lakers, experienced and poised, stole the opener in Chicago. Doubts crept in. Was this just another cruel twist? Was Jordan destined to dominate the regular season, only to falter when it mattered most? But Jordan refused to let history repeat itself. In Game 2, he delivered one of the most iconic plays in basketball history. Driving to the rim, he rose into the air, cocked the ball in his right hand as if to slam it, and then, mid-flight, switched to his left, kissed it softly off the glass, and scored. The move defied logic, physics, and expectation. The crowd erupted. Even Magic Johnson, standing on the court, could only shake his head in disbelief. The Bulls never looked back. They rattled off 4 straight wins, overwhelming the Lakers with relentless defense, efficient offense, and Jordan's unstoppable brilliance. In the clinching Game 5, Jordan didn't just score. He facilitated, rebounded, defended, and inspired. It was no longer just about Michael Jordan, the superstar. It was about Michael Jordan, the leader. When the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard read Chicago 108, Los Angeles 101. The Bulls were NBA champions for the first time in franchise history. Jordan, named Finals MVP, finally held the trophy that had eluded him for so long. In the locker room, surrounded by teammates and champagne, Michael Jordan cradled the Larry O'Brien championship trophy in his arms. Overcome with emotion, he buried his face into it and wept. Years of doubt, of failure, of heartbreak, all released in that moment. It was the image of a man who had sacrificed everything for greatness, and finally, it had paid off. The world took notice. Jordan wasn't just a scorer anymore. He wasn't just a highlight reel. He was a champion. The critics who said he couldn't lead a team were silenced. The whispers that he was too flashy, too selfish, too fragile, they were gone. But what made 1991 special wasn't just the trophy. It was the way Jordan won it. By embracing his teammates. By trusting the triangle offense. By learning that true greatness isn't about carrying the weight alone. It's about lifting others with you. Scottie Pippen's defense on Magic Johnson. Horace Grant's rebounding. John Paxson's timely shooting. It all mattered. And Jordan, at last, understood that championships are built together. Outside the locker room, reporters asked him what it felt like. Jordan smiled through tears. "It's all worth it," he said simply. For Chicago fans, it was more than a win. It was the birth of a dynasty. For the NBA, it was a changing of the guard. Magic Johnson had ruled the 80s. Now, the 90s belonged to Michael Jordan. The first championship is always the sweetest. It's the proof that the dream is real, that the journey wasn't in vain. But for Jordan, it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because once you taste glory, you don't just want it again, you need it. And Michael Jordan wasn't about to stop at one. By the time Michael Jordan lifted his first championship trophy in 1991, he was already the most electrifying player in basketball. But in the years that followed, he became something bigger, something the sport had never seen before. Jordan didn't just dominate the NBA. He became a global icon, a cultural force, and the face of a brand that would forever change the relationship between athletes and the world. The seeds of that transformation had been planted years earlier. In 1984, before Jordan ever played an NBA game, Nike had taken a gamble. At the time, Nike was not the sneaker powerhouse it would later become. Converse ruled basketball courts. Adidas had global credibility. Nike, known mainly for running shoes, was struggling to break through. But when they signed the rookie Michael Jordan to a 5-year, $2.5 million contract, they set in motion a revolution. The first pair of Air Jordans, the black and red bread design, immediately caused controversy. The NBA fined Jordan each time he wore them, claiming the shoes violated uniform rules. Nike didn't panic. Instead, they leaned into it. launching an ad campaign declaring the shoes had been banned by the NBA. It was marketing genius. The more the league resisted, the more fans wanted them. And soon, Air Jordan became more than a sneaker. It became a statement. By the early 1990s, the timing was perfect. Jordan wasn't just winning games, he was dominating them. He had become a champion, and his style on the court, soaring dunks, mid-air improvisations, a tongue-wagging swagger, was unlike anything fans had ever seen. Kids in playgrounds everywhere didn't just want to play basketball. They wanted to be like Mike. Then came the Gatorade commercial in 1992. The jingle was simple. Sometimes I dream that he is me. I want to be like Mike. But the impact was enormous. Jordan wasn't just an athlete anymore. He was a role model, a hero, an aspiration. His image was everywhere. TV screens, billboards, magazine covers. His influence stretched beyond the game and into pop culture. On the court, Jordan backed it all up with relentless brilliance. The Bulls won their second straight championship in 1992, defeating Clyde Drexler and the Portland Trail Blazers in the finals. In Game 1, Jordan put on a performance for the ages, scoring 35 points in the first half, draining 6 three-pointers. After the last one, he turned to the broadcast table, shrugged, and smiled. A gesture that became an instant classic. It was the shrug game. A superstar so hot, even he couldn't explain it. That summer, Jordan's fame skyrocketed even further. The 1992 Olympics in Barcelona introduced the world to the Dream Team, a collection of the greatest basketball talent ever assembled. Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Charles Barkley, and, of course, Michael Jordan. They weren't just a basketball team. They were a global phenomenon. Crowds swarmed them wherever they went. Opponents, instead of playing their hardest, often asked for autographs and photos after games. And while every member of the team was a superstar, Jordan was its beating heart. The Dream Team didn't just win gold. They spread basketball like wildfire across the globe. In Europe, Asia, South America, millions of kids saw Michael Jordan for the first time. The sport became international, and the name Air Jordan became synonymous not just with basketball, but with aspiration, style, and excellence. Back in the NBA, Jordan and the Bulls secured their third straight championship in 1993, defeating Charles Barkley's Phoenix Suns. Barkley had been named league MVP that year, but Jordan took it personally. In the finals, he averaged an astonishing 41 points per game, the highest scoring average in finals history. Once again, he elevated his game when the world was watching. 3 championships in a row, 3 finals MVPs, a global empire of sneakers and endorsements, and a level of fame no basketball player had ever reached before. Jordan wasn't just a Chicago hero anymore. He was a worldwide icon. But that fame came with pressure, endless expectations, constant scrutiny. Jordan couldn't go anywhere without cameras flashing, without fans shouting his name. To some, he was untouchable, larger than life. But behind the commercials and the trophies, he was still human, still a son who leaned on his father, still a competitor who needed rest, still a man trying to balance the weight of a world on his shoulders. The years between 1991 and 1993 were golden. They were the years that transformed Michael Jordan from the NBA's best player into a cultural phenomenon. The championships solidified his greatness on the court. The Air Jordan brand gave him influence off it, and the Dream Team spread his legend across the globe. For millions of people, Michael Jordan was no longer just an athlete. He was a symbol of excellence, of confidence, of possibility. And yet, even at the height of his powers, no one could have predicted what came next. Because just when it seemed like nothing could stop him, life did. By the summer of 1993, Michael Jordan was sitting on top of the world. 3 straight NBA championships. 3 straight finals MVPs. His sneakers were selling in every corner of the globe, his commercials were running during prime time, and his name had become a synonym for greatness. To fans, he looked unstoppable, untouchable. But behind the public image, Jordan was carrying a weight that even he couldn't always show. The pressure was constant. Every game felt like a performance, every shot scrutinized, every decision magnified. Off the court, he lived in a fishbowl, unable to escape the glare of fame. The joy of the game that had once been his sanctuary was beginning to feel like a burden. And then, in July 1993, tragedy struck. James Jordan, Michael's father, his mentor and biggest supporter, was murdered in North Carolina. The news stunned the world. For Michael, it was shattering. His father had been at his side for every milestone, from driveway games in Wilmington to championship celebrations in Chicago. James had always told him he believed his son could be the best, and he had been there to witness it come true. Losing him was like losing a piece of himself. Just weeks later, in October 1993, Jordan stunned the basketball world by announcing his retirement. He was only 30 years old, at the peak of his powers, but he walked away. Standing at the press conference, wearing a dark suit and speaking softly, he said he had lost his desire to play. Without his father, the fire no longer burned the same way. The game felt different. The grief was too heavy. And then came another surprise. Instead of simply retreating into private life, Michael Jordan chose to chase a different dream: baseball. It had been his father's wish that one day Michael would try his hand at the sport they both loved. And so, Jordan signed a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox and joined the Birmingham Barons, a Double-A affiliate. The move drew headlines everywhere. Some laughed, some criticized, some admired. How could the greatest basketball player alive trade hardwood for a dusty baseball diamond? But for Jordan, it wasn't about critics. It was about honoring his father. It was about chasing a challenge that scared him. Baseball did not come easy. The swing was different, the rhythm unfamiliar. Against pitchers who had trained their whole lives, Jordan looked raw, even awkward. He struggled at the plate, finishing with a modest batting average. Yet, what stood out was not the results, but the work. Teammates marveled at his discipline. He was often the first to arrive, the last to leave, hitting pitch after pitch in cages, sweating through long bus rides, refusing to coast on his name. For the first time in years, Michael Jordan was not the star. He was just another athlete chasing improvement. In its own way, that humility was refreshing. And though his baseball career was brief, it spoke volumes about who he was. He wasn't afraid to risk embarrassment. He wasn't afraid to start over. He was willing to fail in pursuit of something meaningful. But basketball wasn't done with him yet. In March 1995, whispers began to spread. Jordan had been seen practicing at the Bulls facility. His competitive fire, though dimmed by grief, had never truly gone out. The league buzzed with rumors. Would he come back? Could he? And then, on March 18th, a simple fax was sent to news outlets. 2 words. Nothing more. I'm back. Those words shook the sports world. In his first game back, wearing number 45 instead of 23, Jordan stepped onto the court against the Indiana Pacers. He looked rusty, his timing off, but flashes of brilliance were there. A few games later, against the New York Knicks, he erupted for 55 points at Madison Square Garden, silencing any doubts. The King had returned. Though the Bulls fell short in the 1995 playoffs against the Orlando Magic, Jordan's comeback was more than a return to basketball. It was a resurrection. He had honored his father's dream. He had faced his grief. And now, he was ready to reclaim his throne. The retirement and baseball chapter remains one of the most surprising turns in sports history. But it revealed the man behind the legend. Michael Jordan wasn't a machine. He was a son, a dreamer, a competitor who needed time to heal. And when he came back, he was no longer just the greatest player in the game. He was a man with a deeper sense of purpose. The NBA had changed in his absence, but Michael Jordan was ready to change it back. When Michael Jordan returned to the NBA in 1995, the league had changed. Younger stars were emerging. Teams like the Orlando Magic looked ready to take over, and some wondered if Jordan's time had passed. But what they didn't realize was that the setbacks of 1995 weren't the end of his story. They were the sharpening stone. By the 1995-96 season, Jordan was back to full strength, hungrier than ever, and ready to rewrite history. The Bulls retooled their roster, adding rebounding machine Dennis Rodman to join Jordan and Scottie Pippen. With Phil Jackson orchestrating the triangle offense, the Bulls had balance, scoring, defense, toughness, and leadership. What followed was nothing short of historic. Chicago stormed through the 1996 regular season, finishing with a then-record 72 wins and only 10 losses. It was the greatest team record the NBA had ever seen. Jordan reclaimed the MVP award, reminding the world that even at 33 years old, he was still the standard by which greatness was measured. The playoffs became a coronation. The Bulls dismantled opponents with precision, advancing to the finals to face the Seattle Supersonics. Jordan was relentless, averaging 27 points per game, and the Bulls secured their fourth championship in 6 years. But for Michael, this title was different. It came on Father's Day, his first finals without his father there to witness it. After the game, Jordan collapsed on the locker room floor, clutching the game ball and sobbing uncontrollably. It was raw, human, unforgettable. A reminder that behind the legend was a son still grieving, still healing, still playing for something bigger than himself. The following year brought another iconic chapter, the 1997 finals against the Utah Jazz. The series was fierce, but Game 5 became one of the most legendary performances in sports history, the flu game. Jordan was visibly ill, pale, dehydrated, barely able to stand at times. Yet he played 44 minutes, scoring 38 points and leading the Bulls to a crucial victory. Every step looked painful, every possession a test of will. But somehow, Jordan rose above it, leaning on Pippen for support as he left the floor, exhausted but victorious. It wasn't just about skill, it was about sheer determination. The Bulls closed out the series, earning their 5th championship. Jordan, once again Finals MVP, had proven that nothing, not even illness, could stop him when it mattered most. And then came 1998, the year that would define the end of an era. The Bulls were aging, tensions with management were rising, and Phil Jackson had been told it would be his last season as coach. The players dubbed it the last dance. Everyone knew the dynasty was coming to an end, but if it was going to end, Jordan was determined it would end on his terms. The Bulls battled through the playoffs, once again meeting the Utah Jazz in the finals. The series was tied, and Game 6 in Salt Lake City became a stage for the greatest closing act in basketball history. With 41 seconds left, Chicago trailed by 3. Jordan drove to the rim for a quick layup, cutting the deficit to 1. On the next possession, he stripped Karl Malone in the post, stealing the ball. And then, with the clock ticking down, he walked the ball up the court, calm, deliberate, knowing the moment belonged to him. He dribbled right, crossed left, froze defender Brian Russell with a subtle push, rose up, and released. The shot floated through the air, as if time itself paused to watch. Swish. Nothing but net. Jordan held his follow-through for an extra heartbeat, as if to etch the moment into memory. The Bulls took the lead with 5.2 seconds left. Moments later, they were champions for the 6th time. Jordan's final shot as a Bull was the perfect ending, the punctuation mark on a dynasty, the image that would live forever. 6 championships, 6 finals MVPs, 2 three-peats. It was dominance that felt mythical, and yet it was real. Jordan had cemented his place not just as the best of his generation, but as the greatest to ever play. For fans, the second three-peat was more than just victories. It was proof of Jordan's resilience, his ability to rise after heartbreak, to push through fatigue, to lead when everything was on the line. The flu game, the Father's Day championship, the last shot. These weren't just moments. They were chapters in a story about perseverance, legacy, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. As he walked off the floor in 1998, holding his 6th championship trophy, the world knew they had witnessed something unrepeatable. Michael Jordan hadn't just won games. He had defined an era. And though questions would linger about whether he was truly finished, one truth was undeniable. The dynasty was complete. The Bulls' run under Jordan was one of the greatest in sports history. And it all ended with that one iconic image. A man in red, frozen in mid-shot, arm extended, creating a memory that would never fade. When the final buzzer sounded in 1998 and Michael Jordan hit the last shot, many believed they had witnessed the perfect ending. 6 championships, 6 finals MVPs, a dynasty sealed in glory. Jordan had nothing left to prove. He walked away, for the 2nd time, leaving behind an aura that felt untouchable. But legacies don't end at the final whistle. For Michael Jordan, life after basketball would show that his influence stretched far beyond the hardwood. In 1999, with the NBA entering a new era, Jordan announced his retirement once again. This time, it felt permanent. He had conquered every challenge, carried the Bulls to heights no one thought possible, and defined the 1990s as the Jordan era. Yet the game, and the world, wasn't quite ready to let go. In 2001, at age 38, Jordan surprised everyone with another comeback, this time with the Washington Wizards. He wasn't the same high-flying phenomenon who dunked on giants or scored 63 on the Celtics. His legs were older, his body slower. But his mind, his skill, and his competitive fire were still unmatched. He averaged over 20 points per game, showing flashes of brilliance, mentoring younger teammates, and reminding fans of his artistry. Even in his 40s, he commanded respect. And though the Wizards never contended for championships, Jordan's presence elevated the franchise, filling arenas and inspiring a new generation to see that greatness doesn't always vanish with age. After finally retiring for good in 2003, Jordan's focus shifted. He wasn't just a retired athlete. He was a brand, an entrepreneur, and eventually, an NBA owner. In 2010, he became the majority owner of the Charlotte Hornets, making him the first former player to hold majority ownership of a team. His competitiveness never faded. Though the Hornets struggled on the court, Jordan's presence in ownership sent a powerful message. Players could evolve into leaders and decision-makers off the court too. Meanwhile, the Jordan brand exploded into an empire. What began with a single pair of banned sneakers in 1984 had become a global phenomenon worth billions. Air Jordans weren't just shoes. They were cultural symbols. Worn by athletes, artists, musicians, and everyday kids, they represented excellence, individuality, and style. Rap lyrics praised them, collectors chased rare editions, and entire communities celebrated their release days. Jordan had transcended sport and embedded himself into the fabric of culture. Then came 2020, when ESPN released The Last Dance, a 10-part documentary chronicling Jordan's career and the Bulls dynasty. It captivated the world, bringing back memories for those who lived through the era and introducing a new generation to the fire of Michael Jordan. The documentary showed his brilliance, but also his flaws, his relentless competitiveness, his sometimes brutal leadership, his insatiable will to win. Far from tarnishing his legacy, it made it more human. The world saw not just a superhero, but a man who demanded everything of himself and everyone around him. Beyond basketball and business, Jordan has also made a mark through philanthropy. Over the years, he has donated millions to causes ranging from children's hospitals to educational initiatives. In 2020, he pledged $100 million over 10 years to organizations dedicated to racial equality, social justice, and education. It was another reminder that his influence extended well beyond sports. And then there is the debate, the one that never ends. Is Michael Jordan the greatest of all time? For many, the answer is yes. 6 championships in 6 tries, never losing in the finals, never letting a series go to a Game 7 in the championship round. His scoring titles, his defensive accolades, his clutch performances, and his cultural impact make the case ironclad. Others point to LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, or future stars. But whether you place him at number 1 or number 2, one truth is undeniable. Jordan set the standard by which all greatness is measured. Even today, nearly 2 decades after his final game, Jordan's shadow looms large. Every rising star is compared to him. Every clutch shot is measured against his. Every signature shoe is judged against Air Jordan. His legacy isn't just in the banners hanging in Chicago or the records etched in history books. It's in the way he changed the game, the way he inspired the world, and the way he turned sport into something larger than sport. Michael Jordan's story is not just about basketball. It's about resilience in the face of failure, growth in the face of doubt, and excellence in the face of pressure. From the boy cut from his high school varsity team, to the champion sobbing on Father's Day, to the businessman building an empire, his journey is proof that greatness is not an accident. It is built, brick by brick, moment by moment, through sacrifice, obsession, and belief. And so, when people talk about Air Jordan, they are not just talking about a man who played basketball. They are talking about a timeless legacy, one that will continue to inspire long after the sneakers are worn, the highlights replayed, and the debates settled. Michael Jordan, the player, the icon, the legacy. Michael Jordan's career was more than points, trophies, or sneakers. It was a masterclass in what it means to chase greatness without compromise. He showed us that failure is not final, that rejection can ignite a fire, and that even under the crushing weight of expectation, the human spirit can soar higher than anyone imagined. From Wilmington driveways to the rafters of Chicago Stadium, from the heartbreak of Detroit to the triumph of 6 championships, from the dusty diamonds of minor league baseball to the global stage of the Dream Team, Jordan's journey was never straight, never easy, but always unforgettable. And what makes his legacy timeless is not only what he accomplished, but how he accomplished it. With relentless work, with fearless leadership, with a demand for excellence that left teammates both inspired and exhausted, with a determination that turned a cut from high school varsity into the greatest career basketball has ever seen. Today, kids who weren't even born when Jordan last played still wear his sneakers, still mimic his fadeaway, still shout his name when they hit a game-winning shot on the playground. That is legacy. That is timeless. So now we ask you, is Michael Jordan still the greatest of all time, or has another player taken that throne? Do 6 rings, 2 three-peats, and the last shot still keep him at the top of the mountain? Share your thoughts below. We want to hear from you. And if you've enjoyed this journey through the life and legacy of Air Jordan, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story of the legends who shaped sports history. Because here on Sports Stars, we don't just talk about athletes. We talk about icons. And Michael Jordan will always be one.